So Zemirah, there's a quote I love about community, and it says that God doesn't call us to do extraordinary things, but to do ordinary things with an extraordinary love. And we're exploring at Mile High this year our initiative of healing and community. And as ministers, sometimes we're individualistic and we do things on our own, but most of our work happens in community. And I wanted to create a series talking with all of our ministers, starting with you, about the impact of community on our own personal lives and as what called forth our professional life in so many different ways. And when I think about that quote, I think of that part of me that's always been driven, that wants to accomplish and create great things. But then I think of the true blessing of my work, which is to both be blessed by, but to have an ordinary difference with people with an extraordinary love. And that's a lot of what community is to me.
I love that. I love that. And, Josh, you speak so wonderfully about the power of community to bring us together, even amidst different views, different opinions, different life paths, different experiences. And I think for me, the second I found Mile High Church, I knew that I wanted to get involved here. I just did. I knew the very first Sunday they were taking choir auditions, and I had never even heard your choir. I didn't know the choir here. I'd never seen them, but I absolutely felt the pull, like I want to be a part of this message and these teachings. And so I signed up for auditions and was scared to death because I didn't even know if I really could sing, but I know I could sing with others. And I think that's kind of metaphorical for me about what community is. In my voice by itself is not something that I really share very often, but when I'm with others, I feel the empowerment, the support, the belonging, and finding that note seems to be sometimes easier when I'm with those beloveds in our community here. So that was my very first introduction to this place.
That's big courage to jump right into the choir like that. And I know you had a spiritual background before that time and all of those. What has been your relationship with community, but especially spiritual community throughout your life?
Yeah, well, I grew up like a church mouse. I always say I was a church mouse. My mom was the choir director in our church, and we were there Sunday nights, Sunday for service, Wednesday nights for choir practice. We had vacation Bible school. I mean, I grew up in a really small town in the Midwest in the farming community, and church was our community. It was spiritual in nature, but it was the place that everyone united at. And so I could just remember as a little girl, we did the candlelight services and we lit the candles, and everyone would circle the small church building around the edges of the pews and everything and hold candles. And to me, that just left a stamp upon my heart. Like I wanted to always have at least a touch point somewhere in my life of spiritual community. So it has taken many paths throughout my life, different faith traditions, different angles, but it's always had a touch point that kind of, for me, has just been an anchor of my life. Without it, I don't know what I would have done sometimes. It's just what held me together in the hardest times and what uplifted me, even when times were okay, So
was ministry and even Mile High Church in a sense a homecoming for you?
Absolutely, it was. Yeah. And finding this place, I mean, the message was more universal, which I grew up in a very, it was Christian based. It was Methodist, United Methodist, but it was very dogmatic and very defined, if you will. But yet we had one minister. It was the times where ministers would travel and come and serve the small community, and then they'd maybe go off to another, and they'd be assigned by some, I don't know, some upper assigning. Somebody was assigning them to our community.
A lot of power, yeah.
Yeah, some power. And we had one, and he brought the spiritual to the church. So he had a birthday for Jesus, or maybe it was Martin Luther. I don't know, but it was to me it was Jesus as a kid, and he did all these things that made spirituality come alive within the teachings, within the Bible studies. And that was my first introduction to how the mystic path, the spiritual can be distilled from the dogma and the theology and the, just the teachings of religion per se. So yeah, when I found Mile High, I was like, oh, they're doing it. They're speaking about it.
Well, one of the things I love about your ministry is that you do a lot of personal study. You do your own work, all of that. And then I can see you sometimes bring that into a class here or into a service or into a ritual, just like you shared with that candle lighting, where like the sacred reveals itself in community and in a way maybe when we're together that it doesn't always do when we're on our own.
Oh, absolutely. I really believe in the power of the Sangha. I mean, I love that teaching from Buddhism that says that this is one of the pillars of how we deepen our spiritual practice, our spiritual understanding, and our connection with other people. And Sangha is community, that we do it together so that we're reflections of one another. As you're studying, and I also know you too, Josh, go deep into your own personal study and your exploration of spirituality and what it means to you. And I love that in community because we can reflect back with one another and we can hold one another when the times get so hard. When I haven't known it for myself, it's been people in community that have been able to know it for me. And I'd go to the practitioner. In the early days of my time at Mile High, 20 years ago, I found several practitioners that I went to as I was climbing. I used to think of those days as kind of climbing my way out of the beliefs, the conditioned beliefs that were not serving me in my life and were creating a lot of havoc and turmoil. And so as I was climbing out of the pot, just like the lobsters try to get out. Well, that's a terrible. Anyway, don't think of boiling lobsters when you hear this. So, but anyway, but as I was sort of climbing my way out of that steeping and things that didn't work, that saturated my struggle. It was practitioner meetings and this community. It was my choir companions singing together, finding a new note, finding a new harmony. I was dreadfully terrified to sing in front of the I had no idea we had to stand up there because I hadn't seen them do it. But the first day I was behind a plant and shaking in the back row, trying not to pass out. And my forehead was going numb. I couldn't even sing because I was hyperventilating. But it was my choir folks that held me through that. And I really think that's the only reason I can stand and actually even give a sermon today or give a talk, because of my community. They were the ones that held me through transcending all of that anxiety, all of that fear, and repatterning to something that made it possible to stand and to share my voice, which was so hard.
And isn't that a powerful purpose of community to help us overcome our anxieties, our fears, and I think, it's maybe the most challenging thing of being in community is to be really seen, beheld, and in ministry, when you get up and give a sermon, you're, reflecting back to everybody else, but you're doing so by saying, I'm going to let you see, I'm going to let you see me. And hopefully by doing that, you're going to see yourself too. So it takes some courage. And maybe that's why some people are resistant to community. For me, I think ministry at some dysfunctional level was my running away from home. Growing up the way that I did without a lot of religion. Religious science isn't super religious-y either, but I almost ran to church communities because they were so different than my family, and thus it was also so impactful when I became a minister and my folks and siblings started coming to church. It was like, wait a second, but it was kind of like this homecoming, and so I kind of hear that a little bit in your story too. And I still joke to this day, and it's a half joke, but if I wasn't a minister, I wouldn't go to church. There's this part of me that needed to be doing something that almost didn't want to admit how much I really needed the community. how much I really needed to have a safe place to overcome those anxieties, to be beheld and seen. And so, ministry has been my path of service to the world, but also my path of healing in it.
100%. 100%. I love what you also brought up in that service, being able to get into action with others, alongside others for a common goal, is another, I think, beautiful gift of community here. When we have our services and even each Sunday, it's just, I walk through the lobby and see how many hands are working together, hearts are working together in service for this common message and experience, and from the infant room, and how the intersection of the parts of our community come together too. It's like this beautiful mandala of creation. Even our drummer Mike goes to the infant room and is with the little ones, and you see that from the practitioners serving in youth and our volunteers that are out in the communities around us. It's just a beautiful orchestra, I think, of all of us individually playing a different instrument or maybe singing a different tune, but we're creating this song together, this experience together. And I love how you explained it so powerfully for your own life. Absolutely can resonate with the idea that this was my safe place to land. This, community was my place that I could feel held when some of the toughest things, in my life were taking place, like divorce or I was becoming a single parent, and had no idea how I was going to walk that path, but that just by the little steps, being with others here, it revealed itself more and more as I went along. And I don't think I'd be here today if I hadn't have been in community, walking through some of those really challenging parts of my life. It just was this that uplifted and held when I couldn't hold.
Well, and how beautiful a purpose of your ministry too now, to hold that space for people to do what you did.
Yeah, and the sanghas in our classes, I was just talking last night about, and just seeing the different ways that people are supporting one another. When somebody shares in class, it's amazing to me how half of the room is like, oh, thank you for saying that. I didn't know that was actually happening in my own life. That was a fear that I've been wrestling with. And thank you for bringing that forward and having courage to say something, because I needed to hear it. And I know so many people say on Sunday, when they listen to your message or one of the messages, they're like, he was speaking just to me. I just needed to hear that thing. And I love that Spirit, I think, is orchestrating that common thread of support and inspiration that comes through as we are together. Those things that are needed, to me, feel like they're gifts of Spirit that move through our message, move through what we do here, our events, and those people that come to be in our community are all an outpicturing of the synergistic energy of all of us together, and vibrate, kind of almost like vibrating together in this co-created space. So
I love that. Yeah. And that's how healing happens, right?
Exactly.
How change happens. And we, the church is a place, I think, to discuss issues, but you alluded to this earlier. For me, it's not a great place to do partisanship. And there's I think his name is Kenneth Burke. You can Google this if you're listening and let me know if I'm wrong or not. But he had this philosophical idea called the endless conversation, and the idea is that you all you walk into a tavern and there's a table and there's people there discussing ideas and arguing for their points of view, and you at some point. Someone gets up from the table and you've been listening and you get to sit down and you put in your 2 cents and you get other people's ideas. But then it's time for you to go, and someone else new comes in, and it's the idea that life isn't always about the individuals, it's about the conversation. And I think in our country, we've lost the places to have sometimes those conversations where you're looking at, what's going on in Minnesota right now, and you want it's all ridiculous, but you want to step back and say to your Republican friends, isn't this a little too aggressive? And you want to say to your liberal friends, well, I think not every police agent out there is a monster, or whatever it may be, and try to create these spaces where we can talk to each other and appeal to the good in one another versus immediately going to the side that wants to hate or wants to cast out. And again, it's a hard example because it does need to be de-escalated there. And I'm not trying to defend, the over-aggressive behavior of some of the ICE or Border Patrol agents out there. But what you wish is there were places of community where people could discuss from a place of heart and from a place of trust, the important issues of this day versus immediately going into how the other side is so wrong and how your side is so right.
Yeah, you bring up a really powerful point. Last night in class, this absolutely came forward, and we actually began class with some sound from, the crystal bowls, but with some meditation specifically sending out the intention of our community and co-created discussion. Anything of benefit that happened in our class last night, we sent it to Minnesota, to those who are suffering, or to those who are experiencing firsthand this division. And, something that it came up again and again throughout our class last night. And some person said, my heart is so heavy, but I've realized that this prayer that we do here in our community, that's where I can start. That's my tether right now. And maybe as I get quiet, I might hear what is mine to do, or I might hear, or I just simply sit there with holding everyone in my heart and practice that. And that's where we all start that conversation, oh, well, I was wondering and another student came back and said, yeah, and I've been reading and meditating with this heart math to try to generate a sense of heart in myself, but also within the class ourselves, we're looking at where do we divide within ourselves, and we start discussing and using our own personal spiritual growth as a place to start and to respond from our own awareness. Where am I feeling fear, feeling judgment, feeling anger, feeling rage, and how can I hold that in community as things that I don't want to be happening around me are happening. And being together, I think, is one of those places where it's so healing right now to be together in the midst of turmoil, in the midst of these conditions of great division and violence and fear in our country. So that's where I felt like our container in community last night was helping us know how to respond, how to reflect, how to what to think, how to absorb some of these stories and experiences that are happening around us.
No, I think that's so beautifully said, Zemirah, and I think, and this isn't to say there's not chaos, for example, going on in Minnesota right now, but the other thing that's happening right now, and it almost always happens in response to tragedies, is there's a lot of healing and community happening. And where you will find tragedy in this world, or especially in the United States of America, you will see a response of community that often brings forth a love and an understanding that doesn't make you say, oh, I'm glad this terrible thing happened. No, not at all. Yeah. But it says, we in our hearts know the world that should be, and we're going to start acting like that. And so as tragic as some of the events are that we're seeing, my hope is that it is a catalyst for patriotism and healing and honoring the woundedness, and for constructive change too, so that we can treat each other better, no matter who's in the country or no matter why, treat each other with the dignity and respect that we know that everyone is worth
absolutely
being treated by.
Absolutely. So well said. Yes.
So it's wonderful to talk to you about healing and community. Thank you for the healing force that you are at Mile High Church. Thank you for your yes to your ministry. And it's an honor to get to work with you here.
Oh, well, likewise, Josh. Thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you for sharing your wisdom with me this morning. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Heal and community, everybody.